Morning, everybody. How are we doing today? I got to say right off the top, I'm really excited to get these things out of our church after this Sunday because they've been standing backstage like looking super creepy, and every time I walked back there for any reason, I just forgot they were there, and I was literally about to like punch one of them a few times because I thought I was about to get jumped backstage. So hey, if we haven't met, my name's Jonathan. I'm the pastor here. We're going to get to that in just a minute. Pre-warning, forewarning, I'll say it up front, I'm not trying to make any political statements up here with the Obama shirt and the Trump hat. Just bear with me till we get to that point. I promise it'll make sense in the end. So it's going to be a fun morning. We have been in a series called How to Be Human. It's been a great way to kind of kick off 2018 because we're taking just a minute, we're pausing for the first few weeks of the year just to ask ourselves, God, how have you made me? What does it mean to be human? How have you wired me? Why do I do the things I do? Why do I act the way I act? What is at the core of who I am and how you've made me? And a couple of weeks ago, week one, we kicked it off by saying, you know what? One major part of being human is that all of us are in process. Part of being human is that you never arrive at perfection. We're all in process, and God even enjoys us in the journey of life as we're in process, which is a beautiful truth of the gospel. Week two, last week, we talked about the fact that humans are thirsty. We're all thirsty, and not just physically thirsty, but spiritually thirsty, deep down hungry and thirsty for something more that can only be found in a relationship with Christ. And this week, we're diving into this idea of worship. And we touched on it a little bit last week, but really we're going to dive a little bit deeper because humans, all humans, whether you're an atheist, a Muslim, a Christian, it doesn't matter, all humans are worshipers. All humans worship something. We were designed for it, and I think our idea of worship is a little bit narrow. It's a little bit of a thin, narrow line, and we think, oh, worship's what you do, when you come to church on Sunday and you sing songs, but really what the Bible teaches us is that worship is about all of life. It's not just about this 1 hour moment every week when you come to church. Worship is about all of your life. It's about your relationships, how you spend your time, how you spend your money. It's about how you work. It's about how you spend your energy. It's about everything you do. And so we're going to look at this. If part of being human is being a worshiper, we've got to answer the question, where are we aiming our worship? What are we worshiping? Because whatever we worship will ultimately shape our life. Whatever captures our thought, our attention, our passion, our energy, whatever captures our interest and our love, it's going to shape our life. It's just how we're made. And so I want to kick things off with a really serious, important question that we all have to answer. Do I have any donut enthusiasts in the room? Okay, 8 of you. Seriously, are there any donut enthusiasts in the room? Thank you, right? Okay, now look, back east, and I think there's a few of them popping up out here out west. There was an establishment in Atlanta. I think it started in North Carolina, but it's slowly spreading across America, and it's been around for a long time. Most of you probably know of it. And I got to say, there was one basically on every street corner of Atlanta, and you know it by the sign. This is a little neon glowing sign. It was one of the greatest marketing strategies in the history of any franchise, and it just says, Hot Now, Krispy Kreme donuts. We got any fans, Krispy Kreme donuts in the room? Oh my gosh, they're so good, right? And I don't care what's going on. Like, you may be happy, you may be sad, you may be depressed, you may be on the way to work, on the way to practice, on the way to school, whatever it is. I promise you, you cannot drive by the Hot Now sign and not pull in and try and get a donut. And here's where they do the switcheroo in that moment, right? A Krispy Kreme donut, oh my gosh. If you've never had one before, it's just like, it's like unicorns dancing on puffy clouds in your mouth. It's so delicious, right? And they're just so good. And when the Hot Now sign is on, it's just like humans are like little mosquitoes flocking to a lamp at night. We all just pull in, and here's where they get you though, okay? They turn the sign on. You never know when it's going to be on, but even at high noon in the middle of the day, you can see it glowing through the bright sunshine or in the middle of the night. It doesn't matter. You all pull in, you go, and you get in there, and the smell hits you. You're ready to have a warm, freshly baked, freshly glazed. I promise I'm not getting any royalties from this for Krispy Kreme. You're all hungry right now. You just want one of those donuts right away, but they turn the sign on before the donuts are done, okay? And when you walk through the doors, you see something like a scene in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. It's like this huge donut machine, okay? And there's this mysterious chef in the back who's just mixing up this vat of ingredients, and he pours it into this trough, this like stainless steel trough that has all these tubes coming out the bottom, and these little perfectly placed circular dough, donut balls are just like right there on the perfect little conveyor belt, and it goes to what I like to call the next step, the stairway of heaven, okay? And they get put on these little risers that go up and down as they move down the conveyor belt, and they're getting just slightly heated, just enough to where they start to rise and take shape as donuts. And you're just watching this whole process happen, and they get off the stairway of heaven, and they get plopped back onto the conveyor belt, and they go down to the fryer where they get turned over a few times and perfectly fried, and then they get put back on the conveyor belt, and all the humans in the place are just following it behind this glass wall, watching the donuts as they go. And then they come to the finale, okay? These freshly baked, warm, delicious smelling donuts. I call it the waterfall glaze of wonder, okay? It looks like this, and I mean, these donuts, they go right underneath this, literally a waterfall of glazed icing. And on the other side, they come out, and you may have made a vow when you walked in, and this is where the brilliance of Krispy Kreme was, okay? You vowed when you walked in, you said, I only need one donut. I just need one. I just need one to get me through the rest of the day. I'll be great. I'll be fine. It'll be good. It was one donut. But by the time you've gone on this journey with the donuts, you feel a connection with them. You started with them in the mysterious ingredient batch, and now you're all the way through the waterfall glaze of wonder, and you're thinking to yourself, you've made an oath now. I will not leave without 50 donuts. I can't do it. I need every donut in this place. Get me to that line. I'm so hungry for donuts now. And that's just how worship works, okay? The illustration here, what I'm trying to say is this is a great illustration for how humans are wired. We take something of God's earth, something that God has made, something of creation, and it's like the ingredients, right? It can be any of God's good gifts that He gave to us on earth. It can be things like food or money or sex or business or anything that we have on earth that isn't inherently sinful in and of itself. And it kind of gets put into the vat. But if that thing is not ultimately aimed towards God and under His authority in our life, our relationships, the way we spend our time, whatever it may be, could even be a hobby. If it's not aimed towards God and put under His lordship and leadership in our life, if He's not the center point of gravity for that, if that thing becomes central, then as we think about it, and as we give our time to it, and as we give our energy to it, and as the donut, if you will, as it takes shape, by the time it gets to the glazed icing at the end, suddenly this gift of God, this good thing that He gave us, whatever it may be, could be anything, becomes something that we can't live without. It becomes something that we have to keep coming back to again and again. It controls us. And it's this picture of how worship works, and really how our hearts, if we're not careful, how they can become idol factories that just push out time and time again different things in our life that we have attached our thoughts to, our minds to, our energy to, our love to, and they become things that we can't live without. And what I want to look at today as we think about this idea of worship and we think about what it means to be human, I want to ask us, I'm going to look at 4 key things, but I want to ask us, what is the center point of gravity in your life? What is the sun, if you will, of your solar system in which all of your life revolves around that center point? Is it God? Is God at the center and the rest of your life revolving around that? Or is it something else and the rest of your life is revolving around something else? And in idolatry and worship, there's a very fine line between the two, and we're about to see this, because what may be an idol for one person may be a legitimate avenue of worship for somebody else. What could be something that is ruling one person could be something for somebody else that's a legitimate platform of worship and of witness in their life. And only you and God know in your soul which is which. It's a thin line, and we're going to look at how God has made us and why this is so important that we aim our worship in the right direction. We attach our attention, our love, our thoughts, and our affections on God and let Him shape the rest of our life, because if we don't, If we don't, the idols of our life will end up mastering us, ruling us, and destroying us, and they are cruel taskmasters. They are not our friends. And so there's 4 key things I want us to think about as we think about this idea of worship. How being human, we're all worshipers. So what is worship? The first thing we're going to look at is the definition of worship. The second thing is the power of worship. The third is the object of worship. And the fourth is the witness of worship. So the definition, the power, the object, and the witness. We're going to go through these together. First thing I want us to see is from Romans 12, verse 1 to 2, and it says this. It says, I appeal to you. This is Paul writing to the church in Rome. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. So Paul says, let me help define this idea of worship for you. Let me just kind of blow the lid off what it means to worship. Worship is a living sacrifice of your entire life, of your body, of all your energy, your thought, your mind, your emotions, of everything you put your time to. Worship is life. Life is worship. It's what you do in your life. Everything should be offered to God as a living sacrifice, and this is our spiritual act of worship. So Paul says right up front, just blatantly, offer yourselves, present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So worship is really just a combination of things, right? It's not just this moment that happens once a week. It's a combination of things that includes all of our life, things that we ask ourselves, what right now am I giving my thoughts to, my affections to, my actions, my attention? What's amazing me right now? What do I enjoy in life the most right now? What's captured my attention, my interest? What do I give my money to? Where do my finances go? What do I give my energy to? What do I give my time to? And really it boils down to this: what do I love? And the scary thing about our world and the scary thing about life, because we're all designed and made by God as part of being human with this worship impulse, is this: anything and everything can be an idol. Anything can become an idol. Anything on God's green earth, and we're going to see this from Exodus in just a minute, can become an idol. And the way a lowercase g, God, right, becomes a God or an idol in our life is simply by the fact that we give it our worship. An idol is not really a God. There is no God but one God, the one true God. And so the only thing that something becomes deity, the only way that some item in this world, some gift of God, becomes a little g, lowercase God, is if we give it our worship. Is if we give it all of our time, our attention, our thought, our energy, and it begins to shape our life. And Romans 1 calls this the great exchange. It says they exchanged the truth of God for a lie. It's exchange is choosing to worship something that God gave us instead of God himself. It's putting something else at the center of gravity in our lives and letting the rest of our lives be shaped around it and formed by it. Eventually, these things become things that we cannot live without. And before we even realize what's happening, something that God made and gave to us is the very thing that's shaping our lives. This is what worship is. The definition of worship is it's all encompassing, it's all of life. It's offering ourselves as a living sacrifice and choosing to say to God, Lord, I'm aiming my life towards you. I'm giving all that I am towards you. I want you to be the center point, and I want you to influence everything else, not the other way around. Second thing I want to look at is the power of worship. The power of worship. And we see this, I mentioned it a second ago in Romans 1, verse 21 to 24. It says this. Again, Paul writing. He says, although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him. So they knew in their souls there is a God, there is a creator, but they did not glorify him or give thanks to him. But their thinking became futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. And although they claimed to be wise, they became fools and exchanged, there it is, they exchanged the glory of the immortal God. Can you imagine what we do here? They exchanged the truth, the glory of the immortal God, for images made to look like a mortal human being and birds and animals and reptiles. Therefore, God gave them over. And this is the power of worship. It's the scary thing about worship. God will give us what we want. He will give us what we want. He's not going to make the decision for us. He's going to say, here I am, worship me, trust me, I made you, I created you, I designed you, I'm the best thing for you. Give me all of your heart, your time, your thoughts, your affection, your energy, and let me influence the rest of your life. Let me influence the way that you live in relationships. Let me influence the way you love your family. Let me influence the way you work. Let me influence your thoughts and your habits and your time and your hobbies and how you spend your money. Let me be the center. Because if that is the truth, if I am the center, then the rest of these things will function in the way that I made them and designed them to function. For your good and for my glory. And this is the center point of it. He says, God will give us over to our idols. He will allow our lives to be shaped by what we worship. And so he says, going down in Exodus 20, verse 3-4, he says that he's a jealous God. He goes, you shall have no other gods before me. Don't make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above or earth below, or that is in the water or under the earth. Basically, God acknowledges the fact that, hey, you're all designed to worship, and if given the chance, you'll worship anything. The word anything that is in heaven above, earth below, in the water, or under the earth. That means anything can be an idol. And humans throughout history have been prone to worship anything on the earth. He says in Matthew 22, and this is something scholars have debated a lot about. They said, hey, when Jesus was asked what the greatest commandment was, he said, in verse 37, he said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. And this is the great and first commandment. Heart, soul, and mind. But when you go back to Exodus 20, verse 3 and 4, the first commandment is, you shall have no other gods before me. And I don't think there's any contradiction there at all. I think they're one and the same. I don't think there even needs to be any debate over this, because what does it mean to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, right? It means there are no other gods before him. He's the first place of love and worship in your life, and therefore he's the one shaping your life, and he knows the power of worship. He knows the power of the human heart and the human soul to take hold of things, to cling hold of things, and for those things, whatever they may be, to shape our lives. It's just like that Krispy Kreme donut factory, right? The more that donut gets thought about and processed and molded over, and then underneath the glaze waterfall, we just can't live without it. It becomes our obsession. And it can be anything on this earth. And so God is saying worship is powerful. Worship includes all of life, and it's very powerful to shape our lives. Third thing I want us to look at is the object of worship. If worship is all-encompassing and it has the power to shape our life, then we better ask ourselves, where is our worship aimed? What are we worshiping? What is at the center of our lives? And this is where it gets tricky, right? Things start to get tricky, because what we're talking about here is inward reflection. A lot of the times, we don't ever pause to stop and think and ask ourselves, man, what's at the center of my life? We just kind of keep trucking through life, and we never stop and ask God, Lord, are you at the center? Or is something else? Are you the one that's shaping my life, or is there something else? And the tricky thing about this is, we don't know if we look at anybody else's life, what may or may not be an idol for them could be worship for somebody else. And I think about the gift of we got our best dad ever right here. He's got a diaper bag. He has his own little stuffed animal. He's ready to dad hard with the straw hat. I don't know what dads don't wear straw hats everywhere they go. I guess this one obviously does. But I love this picture, because the truth is, family is a wonderful gift. We're called to honor our father and mother. We're called to raise up godly children in the Lord. We are called to love our families, but if family becomes an ultimate thing, if it becomes the center of our world and it replaces God in our lives, then when our kids leave or the spouse is not living up to the expectation or whatever it is, family can crush us. It can be a crushing force in our life if it becomes an idol for us. And so there's a fine line between how am I leveraging my family for worship in a God-honoring way, and is family too much? Has it become this thing that is my obsession? It's become my only pride and joy in life. It's become my identity. And only you and God know that. That's between you and the Lord. I think about just the things we do, our hobbies, our leisure, our fun, Maybe it's our fitness, whatever it could be. This idea of these good things that God has given us. Neither of these things are bad. None of these things that are represented up here are bad. They're just part of life. And the question is, how do we approach it in our hearts? Has our hobbies, has our leisure, has the things that we go to for enjoyment or pleasure, are those a good, are they an appropriate part of our life that we use to refuel and get refreshed? Because God created us with a need for rest and refreshment and joy in life, and even to have things in His creation that we love and enjoy. Or if they become an obsession that actually takes us away from people, or the only thing we think about, or the only thing we look to enjoy or look to do. Again, it's a fine line between worship and idolatry. You could put this one here under this category of politics. And it could be business, it could be politics, it could be any number of things that you want to put it, but the question behind it is simply, is your hope ultimately for the future of our nation in God, or is it on what we think the White House can or can't do for us? Or is our hopes and dreams or our anger or our frustrations too anchored in what we see to be public policy or whatever it may be, or is it anchored in something else saying, God, you're in control? And now, do we need Christians in public offices? Do we need Christians in politics? Yes. Do we need to fight for justice in these areas? Yes. I think about Ray and Ashley Bryant, who are in our church, who work for Three Strands Global, who started Three Strands Global, which is an anti-human trafficking organization. And this year, just through this relentless effort between Ray and Ashley, they were able to push legislation across the line that makes education for all of our students across the state accessible and just regarding human trafficking and how to avoid it. I mean, that's a wonderful use of politics and of even of legislation and law and all those sorts of things that they did, and we need Christians in those arenas. But the question is, and where it can even become an idol, is just asking ourselves, man, am I putting too much hope, too much stake, too much of my emotional contentment or joy in this thing that ultimately Jesus is coming back to reign as king? Ultimately, He's the one who's setting the course of history. This one right here, side note, this is all Philip's clothing. He's our worship pastor here. That's all I'm going to say about that. And I'm not even really sure what he's supposed to represent. But I think at the end of the day, it really is just that idea of image. And I think about, there's a story, there's a lady, she wrote a book called Hope Heals, and I think I wrote her name down in here. I don't want to forget it. But she... I'm going to forget it. Hope Heals. The whole idea behind her story and her journey is that she used to be a beauty queen. She was a model. And she suffered a stroke about 5-6 years ago that completely paralyzed the left-hand side of her body. She can't speak well. The entire left side of her face is disfigured now. It's drooping. She can't walk. Everything about her life that used to be her identity, the core, the center of who she was taken away in an instant. And after it happened, she was depressed. She was angry at God. She was frustrated. She wanted to, even in moments, to take her own life. Just so her husband wouldn't have to live with her like this for the rest of their lives. And God brought her through that. But what she says when she speaks, and I've heard her speak on numerous occasions, she said, and it's so powerful, she goes, my identity, the core of who I was anchored and rooted in how I looked. And when that was taken away from me, my entire world fell apart. And that's how you know if something is an idol in your life. What happens when it's taken away? Does it completely destroy you? And it almost did for her. But she said, in God's kindness and His graciousness, He took away what was the core identity of my soul, the sun at the center of my universe, that everything else was revolving around. He said, I need to replace that with me. And sometimes it's going to take a very painful circumstance to do that. But now, the joy that she's filled with and the hope that she can bring as she says, God is the center of my life. Jesus is the reason that I live. And all of my life revolves around Him. And there is hope even after you lose everything you thought you needed in life. And so the question is, we can't sit back and look at other people or even in our own lives. It takes a discernment process. The Bible it doesn't just give you simple, easy answers for how to work this out. We have to go inward and we have to look inward and say, God, are there things in my own heart or my own life that you are pressing on right now as idols that I need to surrender, to put over to you? And I thought about this for myself this week because, man, I was this was one of those sermons that I thought to myself, God, I want to do some inward work here. I want to go into my own heart and ask some hard questions of myself. And so I wrote down just a list of questions. I think we're going to try and post this on social media later, so you don't have to try and write them all down. But these were some questions that came to mind as I was asking the question, Lord, what are the areas in my life? What are the idols in my heart that have become the center of gravity for me that maybe the rest of my life is starting to orbit around? And here are some questions that I asked myself. I said, Jonathan, what is the source of your hope and joy? What's the source of your hope and joy? What is the source of any anger or sorrow you feel? What makes you angry or sad, Jonathan? What things in life would be hard for you to give up if God came to you today and said, I need to take that from you right now? What do you think about? What do you dream about? What do you daydream about when there's nothing to think about? Where does my mind go? What do you enjoy? What do you talk about? Jonathan, what do you make the biggest sacrifices for? Jonathan, where do you spend your time and your money? Jonathan, what do you give your energy to? What would your friends say, Jonathan, is most important to you? What keeps you up at night? As I was thinking through this list and mulling over this, I remember a moment in my own family life that was really just not a proud parenting moment, not a proud father moment at all. And I remember it was right after I'd finished seminary. We had moved to Atlanta, started working for a church down there, and one of our cars just kicked the bucket. It just died straight up, and so we actually got to buy for the first time a new car. It was the first time we'd ever gotten a new car. We were both excited about it. We'd been married for a while, but this was kind of the first new car. And I'll never forget, one day I had just washed it. It was all cleaned up. It was looking great. And I was inside. We were in our house in Atlanta, and Lily Hope, my daughter, comes running inside, and she goes, Dad, Sawyer's outside with a rock, and he's trying to paint the side of your car with a rock. And I was like, what? And I sprint out the front door, and there my little 2-year-old son is just scratching and scrawling away with a piece of gravel all the way down the side of this black, freshly painted, freshly waxed car, and he went straight to the steel, okay? Through every layer of paint, there was no fix a dent on this sucker. It was done. And the anger that rose up inside of me, just the frustration and the way I responded to my son in that moment, who had no clue what he was doing. Afterwards, I literally, he didn't even know. I had to repent to my 2-year-old for how angry I got at him. I mean, there's some boundaries, right? You got to be firm in parenthood. But in my own life there, I was like, dang, is this car too important to me? That I would treat my son like that in that moment. Is this too much for me right there? Gosh, what's more valuable to me? My son or this car? My son who had no clue what he was doing as a 2-year-old, just having fun, or this new car? And sure, I could be sad about it. Sure, it's a new car. It's right to be excited about something like that. It's not inherently sinful. That's not wrong in itself. But when the emotion that rose up in me and the emotional attachment that I'd given to that car, I had to ask myself, dang, is this an idol for me? If God came to me tomorrow and asked for it, what would I say? And I think this is an inward journey that we all have to take. We all have to ask ourselves, God, what are the answers to these questions? Would you show me? This is part of being a Christian. Journeys like this, inward, is part of being a Christian, because worship is about inward reflection and outward expression. Worship is about inward reflection, discerning, where am I aiming my life? Where am I aiming my heart, my love, my emotions? What is the center of gravity in my universe? And then it's also about outward expression. How do I live my life from that place? What if somebody looked at my life, would they say, that's what's most important to him? That's where his hopes and dreams lie. That's what all his time, attention, affection goes to. We have to ask those questions. And so the last thing about worship that I want to touch on is the witness of worship. We've talked about the definition, the object, the power, but now the witness of our worship. And to understand the witness of our worship, I'm just going to paraphrase the story. I'm going to tell it to you because it's a long story, but it's in 2 Kings 5 about a man named Naaman. And he was basically the military prime minister, the head general of Syria at the time. And he was a leper. He was diagnosed with leprosy. And there was a man in his official cabinet that said, hey, I think there's a guy in Israel, a prophet in Israel named Elisha, who's been known to heal lepers. Maybe you should go and talk to him, see if he has anything for you. And so a Syrian, Naaman, who worshiped the god Ramon, literally went all the way to Israel. And tried to meet with Elisha. And he got really frustrated because Elijah wouldn't meet with him face to face. He sent his servant to talk to him. And his servant said, hey, Elisha said, go dip yourself in the river 7 times. And then come back and see me and your leprosy will be cleansed. And he got frustrated. Naaman was like, I come all the way here and he won't even talk to me face to face. And I could have just taken a bath in a river back in Syria. What a pointless trip. And one of his servants said, Naaman, don't be prideful, don't be arrogant, listen to the prophet, just give it a shot. Give it a shot. So he goes and dips himself in the river 7 times and comes back and his leprosy is completely cleansed. It says his skin is like that of a new child, a newborn baby. And in his shock and his awe, he says, now I believe that the God of Israel is the only true God. He said, never again will I bow my knee to the God of Ramon. Will never bow my knee to Ramon again. But he goes to Elisha, and this is the tension that we feel with idolatry, and this is the witness of our worship, how, man, there is no just easy solution to how this stuff gets lived out in our life, because he goes, dang, part of my job as the prime minister of Syria, right, part of my job is to go with my king into this temple, this idolatrous temple of Ramon every day, and I have to bow there and sacrifice with him. So what does he do? Does he say, hey, I'm staying here with you, Elisha, I'm never going back there? No. He goes back and he says, Elisha, may your God forgive me. May God, the God of the universe, forgive me, because I'm going to go there and I'm going to bow again, but I want you to give me 2 mule loads worth of dirt. And every time I go into the temple, I'm going to spread the dirt from Israel on the floor beneath my knees so that everybody in that temple will witness the fact that I am not bowing to Ramon, but to God. Isn't that brilliant? That's like creative problem solving, right? He's like, my heart is no longer given to Ramon. My worship is no longer aimed at him, but I have to live my job. And I want God to use me as a witness where I am, so I'm taking dirt that everyone's going to watch me put beneath my knees, and I'm bowing not to Ramon, but to the God of Israel. And I thought about this. I said, there's no formula for this. Idolatry is a thin line in our lives, and you have to ask yourself the hard questions. What is the center of your universe that the rest of your life is revolving around? And what is the witness of your life? What's the witness of your life? Are you thinking about your business and your family and your relationships and your friend and where you spend your money and your time and your energy and all these things which are worship? Or are you bringing dirt along to say, in all of these areas, I'm bowing down to God? In all of these areas, my witness is going to be pointed to him and not to myself. He is the center of gravity in my world. And look, I can't stand up here and for everybody's situation give you the formula. This is something you have to work out between you and your Father in heaven. And it takes discernment. It takes years of wisdom. It takes wrestling. It takes wondering, am I doing this right or wrong? God, I want to please you with my life. Lord, I want to dethrone these idols in my heart. I want you to be the center of gravity in my life. And this is worship. This is what it looks like to walk this thing out, to live it out in your own life. You have to do the inward reflection, the journey, to ask yourself the hard questions of where is the fine line of idolatry and worship in my life? What good things has God given me that are starting to become ultimate things? What things are obviously things that I run to like a warm Krispy Kreme donut every day that I need to stop running to? What thing is controlling me? What's mastering me? And what is under the lordship of Christ in my life and being used in a godly way? So these are questions we all have to ask, and part of being human is worship. And the question is, where are you aiming your worship? And so as we come to a close here tonight, as the worship team comes back up, I want to encourage you to pray. And we're going to have some elders and some chaplains down front here. And if you want to pray with somebody about some of these things, I want you to come down after the song or during the song and find someone to pray with. And there's a few things that I want us all to face and to ask ourselves today. The first being, what are those idols, the clear idols that even as I was talking, you're like, yep, that's an idol. That's an area of my life that is not submitted to God. It's an area that has too much time, attention in my life that you need to let go of. That you need to surrender to God daily and say, Lord, I need to take that thing off the throne of my heart and put you back there. where you're supposed to be. And so if you want prayer for something like that in your life, I want to encourage you to come and get prayer tonight, or just to spend some time talking to God in your seat. But the second one being, and just plain and simple, maybe you've never thought of Jesus as being the center of your life, the one whom you've put your faith in. He's the sun of your solar system. He's the center point of gravity in which everything else revolves. Maybe he's always just been one of the planets kind of circling around the most important things of your life, which are not him. And God just says, if you've never put me at the center, if you've never understood what it means to follow me, it really is a total reorientation of your life around Jesus. And it's not that suddenly all your issues get solved or all your idols are dethroned, but it really is a reorientation of your life around Jesus at the center of everything. He's at the center of your family. He's at the center of your hobbies and how you enjoy and unwind. He's at the center of what you believe about our country and our politics or what those things are. He's at the center of your image, your identity. Jesus at the center. And so if that's you and you've said, look, Jesus has never been at the center of my life, I want to encourage you, maybe write it down on the card in front of you in the back of your seat in front of you, and let somebody know that I want to pray with somebody. Maybe come down front and pray with somebody. But don't leave here today without Jesus being the center of your life. Amen? Amen. Let's pray. God, I pray in this moment that you would raise up worshipers in this house that want to center their lives around you. We want to center our time, our energy, our thoughts, our affections, our love, our finances, our work, our companies, our businesses, whatever it may be, Lord. We want to center them around you, God. We want to know how our worship can become a witness in our place of work. What handfuls of dirt that we can bring along with us every day and put beneath our knees, and we bow to you, God, no matter where it may be. Father, I ask in Jesus' name right now, if there's anybody in this room who has not put their faith in you, in whose life you are not the center of their universe, Lord, I pray they would not leave today without praying with somebody about that. God, be the center of our worship, be the foundation of our life. Let us aim our lives and our hearts toward you above all else. Jesus, have all of our praise, have all of our worship, have all of us today. I ask this in Jesus' name.